Hey, Vinny Milkus Outdoors. And before we get into like probably the next video when we do some of that boat maintenance things I was talking about in the last kind of update video, I wanted to talk about the changing kind of face of tournament fishing, or the changing these dynamics that are happening and with various anglers, and myself included. When I kind of left the MPFL last year, was based off, well, a few different issues, and why I kind of stepped back from all tournaments in particular for a while, and that is the economics of it, the financial obligations, and the possible return you could get off these. Now, back in the day when I was like so many years ago, when I fished when I was like 16 to 18, when there was invitationals out west, Bass Invitationals, where there's FLW stuff going on. There was all kinds of things. You could afford to do travel maybe from the West Coast to the East Coast. There was big purses. There was the catchphrase of fishing world, non-endemic sponsors, or there's just money. The payouts in relation to the field and the amount of investment you put in were a lot better. Prospects of actually making it made sense. And it's ever since then, it's ever increasingly gotten harder and harder. And it doesn't mean, the only thing it does is it becomes like a disincentive for some people, especially Western anglers, excuse me, who arguably have some of the most talented anglers in the country for a number of reasons. It's a disincentive for them in many ways, and a lot of that talent pool doesn't really get tapped for some of the large organizations like Bass or FLW, not lesser extent FLW, because they have the Toyota series that still goes out there, and they still try to pull from that. And I say FLW, I mean Major League Fishing, TPT. I know I still hung up on that one, but what I've seen this year in particular, so we've seen that trend happening over the last 20 years, essentially, of where it's becoming less, advantageous to take that plunge into fishing, just purely out of passion. But it was still, if you did the right thing, if you got, the right sponsors, whatnot, it can make it happen. And now we've seen a transition where you kind of actually have to, get other forms of income in the last 5 years to be able to make it on the circuit, then hopefully make some checks. Maybe you win a few or whatnot, or maybe you don't over a couple of years. You just make, good showings, have good sponsors, and are able to maybe monetize some other ways, YouTube or whatever the case may be. Excuse me for a second. Whenever I'm on this now, I got allergies. But anyway, so what has happened the last 2 years, when you have this significantly price, or significant rise in the price of actually doing business in order to fish, because this is a small business in a sense when you're in the fishing, when you're fishing tournaments, or trying to make a go of it. So you look at the entry fees. So if you're in a professional level event, it's usually about $5,000, not minus, and then plus add on gas and diesel or whatever, or wherever you're going to stay, hotels, campgrounds, food and all that. Every one of those, besides, let's say the tournament, I would say that's gone up over the years, but the last couple of years, I think major tournaments have still been about $5,000, unless you're on the BPT, and then you were at no entry fee for a little bit, and all of a sudden you pay an entry fee. That's a whole nother subject. I'm just talking about in line, just a general consensus of all tournament organizations. So about $5,000 for a professional level tournament. And then if you go to Toyota Series, you're looking at about, let's call it $1,500 to $1,800, or entry fee for opens or Toyota Series type thing. Anyway, so $5,000. By the time you look at the diesel prices, you look at food prices, both of which have just skyrocketed. Not only that, your housing, like your Airbnbs and all that, that's gone up as well. So you see guys like, partnering together, which is that's awesome to have travel partners. But one of the things your travel partner really can't help you out with is the diesel or the gas, or I guess food they can a little bit, but that has more than doubled in some cases. It's more than doubled in a lot of cases across the country. Diesel especially, gas is way up as well. Those costs right there, and then you couple in the fact that a lot of the tournament circuits now, even though your entry fees are more than they were, like say 20 years ago, the payouts are even worse. So it's and you couple that with just the fact that or they call inflation or rising prices. When you even if you win a tournament, the amount of that money that actually is profit is less. So we're seeing. I know it's 5 minutes of me just going on about this topic, and I'm not even going to go into it in great detail. I was just trying to broad view it, wave top it, because this is the decisions that are happening right now for some of these anglers. A guy like Ishman Rowe, who's decided to back off and fish more locally. Some other guys that have pulled out of different circuits in order to, one, consolidate their resources to make a run at maybe being on the Elite Series. Some of those guys are pulling completely out and just fishing regional tournaments. That's kind of where I'm at too. It's like where I'm looking at dipping my toes back in the tournament fishing after a year, like pretty much hiatus. It's looking at the economics of it. Well, if I go try to get back on with like an NPFL, or I try to qualify for how much money am I going to be out? Am I dropping 50 to 100 grand with nothing to show for it? Or even if I do make it, let's say I qualify for the Elite Series or something, if I was to get in all the opens, after that whole marathon season, 80, 100 grand later, I somehow got to come up with another 45, 50 grand to get on the Elite Series. That's not guaranteeing sponsors or whatever. So it's just like a lot of us, it's not economically viable unless you already are established business or whatnot, which is cool. Like, I know Ben Milliken or Milliken Fishing is getting in there. That's perfect because he developed himself before and has a really good base. It's not a big deal. He's just doing it for the fun of it. It's not a business decision necessarily. It is, but he can afford to take the loss if he does. It's another evolution in his wants and desires in a career. Whereas some of us have gone and kind of, wanted to sacrifice and get into tournament fishing. And it's just, if you get it, and the returns just don't look as great. Not saying you can't do it, not saying it's a passion, but I'm saying I'm passionate about tournament fishing just in general. So all it is doing is forcing me to look more local and look at the industry differently, and maybe go at the YouTube route, or maybe go at product development route, and then fish for just the passion of it. Fish local ones, fish Toyotas. Maybe you get a shot. Or for me personally, I like to fish one bass things. I'd like to go to that hardcore. I'd be perfectly happy for the rest of my life just fishing one bass tour, or the circuit of opens there out west. But the point being is that when I look at that, that's actually more economical. Let's say I just did that and I just stayed around. Let's say I went to Arizona or California. Drive time, fuel, money, all the costs in relation to the amount that you can win in one of those, like say the U.S. Open. If you were to swing across the fences, you win almost a couple $100,000 for less than $2,000 entry fee, and not having to drive that far. And then you can go to Havasu, do the same thing, or Mojave, or maybe not 150,000, but like a $50,000 to $75,000 win, or top prize, and plus it pays out big fish and all the way down to like whatever it is, decent amount, and you still get some press and some you can do some things for your sponsors. I mean, that seems more viable to me than actually going on a national circuit at this point. Going on the Toyota Series, and instead of relying on those circuits to those bigger circuits like the Elite Series and BPT to get your name out there for the sponsors, to put you on a television, the dying media platform of television, you create your own platform and you bring it with you. And that way, when you do these semi-pro type tournaments, or I'd consider one bass actually as a pro level tournament, but you can also get, it's debatable, but there's such high level talent there. But anyway, you bring the media, the audience, the ability to capture that, and for your sponsors, and you mark and you push that out to an audience, as opposed to chasing the audience that maybe Bass and BPT have. So I think that to this day and age, you see an evolution in the fishing industry in that regard, but also the pressures economically for high level talented anglers to actually pull out of national circuits and focus on more regional specific areas, and are still able to monetize that in an effective manner. And I think Ishman Rowe is going to, I heard something about him trying to do that, stay locally. He's been doing it in California, tearing it up there, but in the Delta, which if you got a passion like me, I got a passion for Western fisheries. I really do. you can throw me out there, and like I just love being out on a canyon style lake or any of those western fisheries, and it's just a passion of mine. So he loves the Delta, I know that. Excuse me, my allergy, man. He loves that, and if you can do something and make it a little bit more economically viable or financially viable, and then also, you know, still be passionate about something, then why not? Anyway, the whole thing is I'm probably going down a bunch of rabbit holes. It's the fact that fishing as an industry is becoming more regionalized with talent. You do have bass or whatever, but they are predominantly southeast, northeast, and the rest of the country, even the interior part of the country, is being kind of barely touched. BPT, FLW is touching around the country, but their main circuit, their high-level circuit, is mainly south, maybe some in the center, and then north, and that's it. The whole larger part of the country is excluded. So are they really national circuits? I don't think so. In that regard, they're the circuits of name or renowned or whatever, but they're not. So there's more regional circuits, and I think those regional circuits, like let's say take a Apex Tour, a One Bass, I think that those have the same amount of legitimacy, and we're going to see them become more legitimate as some of these high-level anglers decide to just stay in their regions, fish large events, develop their own audiences. And anyway, that's the evolution I see in fishing, especially with the rising cost of being able to do so and the diminishing return on being on one of these high-level circuits. Anyway, that's a lot of minutia. Hopefully you stayed with me, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.